The thunderous crack of a gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Stillwater, Montana territory. But Zara Nichols barely flinched as she stared at the letter in her trembling hands. It wasn't the violence outside that made her blood run cold. It was the realization that her husband Harold had vanished with their savings, leaving her with nothing but a mountain of debt and a failing general store in the spring of 1882. Mrs. Nichols. The bank manager, Mr. Peterson, cleared his throat uncomfortably. His round spectacles caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window, momentarily blinding Zara. "I'm afraid I need an answer today. Your husband borrowed heavily against the store and your home. The payments are 3 months overdue." Zara carefully folded the letter Harold's cowardly goodbye and tucked it into her pocket. At 26, she had expected to be starting a family by now, not facing financial ruin. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a sensible bun, and her once fine dress had been mended so many times that it was more patch than original fabric. "How much time can you give me, Mr. Peterson?" Her voice remained steady despite the panic rising in her chest. 2 weeks, Mrs. Nichols. After that, I'm afraid we'll have to seize the property." He looked genuinely sorry, which somehow made it worse. Everyone in town knew Harold had been gambling heavily before he disappeared. The whispers followed her everywhere. Outside the bank, Stillwater was alive with the usual bustle of a growing frontier town. Founded just 15 years earlier when the Northern Pacific Railroad began pushing westward, it had quickly become an important supply stop for ranchers, miners, and settlers. The mountains loomed in the distance, their snow-capped peaks a stark contrast to the brown plains surrounding the town. Zara walked slowly back toward her store, her mind racing. The business hadn't been profitable for months. Harold had driven away customers with his drinking and surly attitude. She had exactly $23.47 in the cash drawer, and bills totaling over $2,000. The mathematics of her situation were brutally simple. "Watch yourself, madam," a deep voice called out just as Zara stepped absently off the boardwalk. A large wagon loaded with timber rumbled past, missing her by inches. Strong hands steadied her, and she looked up into the face of a man she didn't recognize. "Thank you," she murmured, embarrassed by her carelessness. "I was lost in thought. Dangerous place to be wandering." His lips curved into a gentle smile beneath a neatly trimmed mustache. He was tall, with broad shoulders and skin tanned by the sun. Unlike many men in town, he wasn't covered in trail dust or smelling of whiskey. His clothes were simple but well-maintained denim pants, a blue cotton shirt, and a worn leather vest. A cowboy's hat sat atop his brown hair, pushed back slightly on his head. "Yorick Ellis," he said, tipping his hat. "Just rode in from my ranch south of here." "Zara Nichols." She smoothed her skirts, suddenly conscious of her appearance. "I own the general store." The words, at least for now, remained unspoken. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Nichols. I was actually heading there next. Need supplies for the ranch." Zara's merchant instincts immediately surfaced through her personal troubles. "Then please follow me. I'd be happy to help you find what you need." The general store was dusty and poorly stocked. Harold had let the inventory dwindle to almost nothing, selling off their best merchandise to pay gambling debts while neglecting to reorder essentials. Zara felt a fresh wave of shame as Yorick Ellis surveyed the nearly empty shelves. "I apologize for our limited selection," she said. "We're expecting a shipment soon." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Ellis picked up a tin of coffee and a bag of sugar, seemingly unbothered by the store's condition. "These will do fine, and perhaps some of those nails if you have them." As she wrapped his purchases, Zara noticed his kind eyes, observant and intelligent, studying her face. There was no judgment there, only curiosity. "You're new to running this place?" he asked casually. Zara hesitated, then decided there was no point in pretending. Everyone in town knew her situation anyway. "My husband managed it until recently. He's gone now." "I'm sorry to hear that." Ellis's tone was genuine. "Running a store is no small task, especially one that's drowning in debt," Zara said, immediately regretting her candor. "I apologize, Mr. Ellis. You didn't come here for my troubles." He paid for his purchases, deliberately laying down more money than the items were worth. When she tried to give him change, he shook his head. "Keep it. Fair price for quality goods." They both knew it was charity, but his manner was so matter-of-fact that Zara couldn't bring herself to protest. Pride wouldn't pay her debts. "I'll be in town for a few days," Ellis said as he gathered his purchases. "Might need a few more things before I head back to the ranch." "Good day, Mrs. Nichols." After he left, Zara leaned against the counter, exhaustion washing over her. The store had seen only 3 customers all day, and Ellis was the only one who'd bought anything substantial. At this rate, she'd be living on the street by month's end. That evening, after closing the store, Zara climbed the narrow stairs to the small apartment above. It was a modest space, 1 bedroom, a tiny sitting area, and a kitchen barely large enough for a stove and table. She and Harold had been happy here once, or so she'd thought. Now she wondered if he'd ever truly loved her, or if she'd simply been convenient, a respectable front for his increasingly disreputable activities. She heated water for tea and opened her ledger book. The numbers hadn't improved since yesterday. She would need a miracle to save the store, and miracles were in short supply in Montana territory. A knock at her door startled her. Few people came calling at this hour. She approached cautiously, wishing she had a pistol like many frontier women carried. "Who is it?" she called. "Yorick Ellis, madam. Sorry for the late hour." Curious, Zara opened the door to find the cowboy standing there, hat in hand. "Mr. Ellis, is something wrong?" "No, madam. I just had a business proposition and thought it might be best discussed privately." She hesitated only briefly before gesturing him inside. In her precarious situation, she couldn't afford to dismiss any potential opportunity. "I was just making tea." "That would be much appreciated." Ellis sat at her small table while she prepared a second cup. He seemed too large for the modest room, but his presence wasn't intimidating. Rather, there was something reassuring about his quiet confidence. "Your store has potential, Mrs. Nichols," he began, accepting the steaming cup she offered. "Good location. Stillwater's growing and folks need supplies." "The store's potential isn't the problem," Zara replied, sitting across from him. "The debts my husband left behind are." Ellis nodded as if she'd confirmed something he already suspected. "I heard some talk in town today. Sounds like you're in a tough spot." "That's putting it mildly." She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "In 2 weeks, the bank will take everything." "What if I could help?" Zara regarded him suspiciously. She'd already received several offers from men in town, all with strings attached that she found unacceptable. "And what would you want in return, Mr. Ellis?" He seemed to understand her wariness. "A business partnership, Mrs. Nichols. Nothing more. My ranch is doing well, but I need a reliable place to sell my beef and buy supplies. Having a stake in a general store would benefit me." "You're proposing to buy into my failing business?" The idea seemed absurd. "I'm proposing to invest in a business that's failing only because of temporary circumstances." His eyes held hers steadily. "You need capital to pay off debts and restock." "I need a partner in town who knows merchandise and customers." "You don't know me, Mr. Ellis. I could be as dishonest as my husband." A slight smile crossed his face. "I'm a fair judge of character, Mrs. Nichols." And unlike your husband, you're still here facing your troubles instead of running from them." Zara sipped her tea, considering his words. "Even if I wanted to accept your offer, the debt is substantial, over $2,000. I can cover it," he replied simply. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Ellis looked down at his cup for a moment. "When I first came to Montana 10 years ago, I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a broken-down horse. A rancher named Thompson took a chance on me, gave me work when no one else would. Later, he helped me get my own spread started." He looked up again. "Sometimes a person just needs one fair chance." His words resonated with something deep inside Zara. All her life, she'd done what was expected of her, been a dutiful daughter, then a supportive wife. She'd never asked for help, never expected it. But now, facing ruin through no fault of her own, perhaps it was time to accept an outstretched hand. "I would need to know more details," she said cautiously. "And I won't accept charity disguised as business." "I wouldn't offer it," Ellis assured her. "This would be a proper partnership. Equal share in the profits once the debts are paid. I'd provide the money, you'd manage the store. We'd both benefit. May I think about it overnight? Of course." He stood, placing his hat back on his head. "I'm staying at the Frontier Hotel. You can find me there tomorrow." After he left, Zara sat at the table for a long time, turning the proposition over in her mind. She had few options, none of them good. She could beg the bank for more time, though Mr. Peterson had made it clear that wouldn't be forthcoming. She could try to sell what little inventory remained and flee town like Harold, abandoning the debts, but also her reputation. Or she could accept this surprising offer from a stranger. By morning, her decision was made. After opening the store, she placed a "back soon" sign on the door and walked to the Frontier Hotel. She found Ellis in the dining room, finishing breakfast. "Mr. Ellis," she said, approaching his table, "I've considered your offer." He gestured for her to join him. "And I'd like to accept with conditions." Zara sat, her back straight, her voice firm. "First, everything must be legal and properly documented. Second, I want a written agreement that I can buy back your half of the business eventually if I choose. And third, I maintain full control over the day-to-day operations of the store." A smile spread across his face. "Those seem like reasonable terms, Mrs. Nichols. I think we have ourselves a deal." He offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she shook it. That afternoon, they met with Mr. Peterson at the bank and with the town's only lawyer, drawing up partnership papers and arranging for the payment of Zara's debts. By sunset, Nichols General Store had become Ellis and Nichols General Mercantile, and Zara had, for the first time in months, hope for the future. "Let me give you everything you need to make this place thrive," Ellis had said as he signed the final documents, and Zara had believed him. Not just because she needed to, but because there was something in his eyes, a steadiness, an honesty that compelled trust. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. With Ellis's capital, Zara ordered new inventory from suppliers in Helena and as far away as St. Louis. She hired a local carpenter to repair the worn floorboards and build new shelving. She even invested in a proper sign, painted in bold letters that could be seen from across the street. Ellis returned to his ranch after a few days, but rode into town weekly to check on their business and bring fresh meat and produce to sell. Each visit, he stayed a little longer, often helping around the store or sharing a meal with Zara in her apartment. They talked about the business, about Stillwater, about Montana's harsh winters and glorious summers. But never about personal matters. Ellis didn't ask about Harold, and Zara didn't inquire about his past. By midsummer, the store was flourishing. Word spread that Ellis and Nichols carried the best selection of goods at fair prices, and customers who had avoided the place during Harold's tenure returned. Zara extended credit cautiously to reliable townsfolk and ranchers, and established regular delivery routes to outlying farms. One hot July afternoon, Ellis arrived with a wagon loaded with fresh vegetables from his garden and beef from his smokehouse. As they unloaded the goods, Zara noticed he seemed preoccupied. "Is everything all right, Mr. Ellis?" she asked as they carried crates into the store. "Yorick, please," he corrected her, not for the first time. "After months of partnership, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Very well, Yorick," she conceded with a small smile, "but you haven't answered my question." He set down a crate of potatoes and wiped his brow. "I've been thinking about expanding. The railroad's bringing more settlers every month. This town's going to grow, and we should grow with it." "What did you have in mind?" "A proper butcher counter in the store. Maybe start carrying more furniture and household goods for new families. And—" He hesitated. "I was thinking we might want to consider purchasing the vacant lot next door. We could expand the building." Zara was surprised by his ambition but found herself intrigued. "That's a significant investment. The ranch is doing well, and so is the store. I think we can afford it." They spent the rest of the afternoon discussing possibilities, sketching rough plans on the back of an old invoice. Yorick's enthusiasm was infectious, and Zara found herself excited about the future in a way she hadn't been since before her marriage turned sour. As evening approached, she realized they hadn't eaten since breakfast. "Would you join me for supper? I could prepare something upstairs." "I'd like that," he replied. "But let me take you to the hotel restaurant instead. We should celebrate our successful partnership." The Frontier Hotel's dining room was the closest thing Stillwater had to fine dining. Linen tablecloths and proper silverware gave it an air of sophistication that belied its frontier location. Several heads turned as Zara and Yorick entered, and she immediately felt self-conscious about being seen dining with a man who wasn't her husband. "Perhaps this isn't appropriate," she whispered as they were led to a table. "We're business partners having a meal," Yorick replied calmly. "There's nothing improper about that." Nevertheless, Zara was acutely aware of the curious glances from other diners. Stillwater was still small enough that gossip traveled fast, and a woman in her position had to be particularly careful about her reputation. Their meal was pleasant despite her initial discomfort. Yorick told her stories about his early days in Montana, working cattle drives and saving every penny toward buying his own land. He described the two-room cabin he'd built with his own hands, which had since expanded into a proper ranch house. "And you never married?" Zara asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. Yorick didn't seem to mind. "Never found the right woman, or perhaps never stayed in one place long enough to court properly." He studied her for a moment. "May I ask about your husband? You never speak of him." Zara set down her fork, appetite suddenly diminished. "Harold and I married young. He was charming, ambitious, or so I thought. We moved to Stillwater 5 years ago to open the store. Things were good at first." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Then he started gambling, drinking. The store began to fail, but he kept borrowing money. When he disappeared, he left a note saying only that he couldn't face his debts and that I shouldn't try to find him." "I'm sorry," Yorick said softly. "You deserved better." "I've had time to reflect on our marriage," Zara continued, finding it unexpectedly liberating to speak of it aloud. "I realize now that I never truly knew him. I saw what I wanted to see." "That's not your failing," Yorick assured her. "Some people wear masks so convincing that even those closest to them can't see beneath." Their conversation shifted to lighter topics, but something had changed between them, a new understanding, a deeper trust. By the time they walked back to the store in the gathering twilight, Zara felt a curious lightness in her chest, as if a burden had been partially lifted. At her door, Yorick bid her good night with his usual courteous hat tip. "I'll return next week with more supplies." "Thank you for dinner," she said, "and for listening." "My pleasure, Zara." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something in the way he said it made her cheeks warm. As summer faded into autumn, the store continued to prosper. Zara and Yorick implemented many of their expansion plans, including purchasing the adjacent lot. Construction began on an addition to the building, which would house a proper butcher shop and expanded dry goods section. Yorick now stayed in town for days at a time to oversee the work, leaving his ranch hands to manage his property. Their partnership evolved into friendship, then something more complex that neither acknowledged openly. They took meals together regularly, spent evenings discussing books or playing checkers, and gradually learned each other's stories. Yorick spoke of his childhood in Pennsylvania, his father's work on the railroads, and his own decision to seek his fortune in the West at 18. Zara shared memories of growing up in Ohio, her dreams of becoming a teacher before her marriage, and her lingering uncertainty about her future. On a crisp October morning, Zara was arranging a display of winter boots when Mrs. Hollister, the banker's wife and Stillwater's most notorious gossip, entered the store. "Good morning, Mrs. Nichols," she said with exaggerated politeness. "My, how lovely the store looks these days." "Thank you, Mrs. Hollister. Can I help you find something?" The older woman pretended to examine a pair of gloves. "I was just curious about your arrangement with Mr. Ellis. The town's been talking, you know." Zara stiffened. "Mr. Ellis is my business partner. There's nothing to talk about." "Of course, dear." Mrs. Hollister's smile didn't reach her eyes. "But a young widow spending so much time with a bachelor, well, people will talk regardless." "I'm not a widow, Mrs. Hollister. My husband abandoned me." Zara's voice was sharper than she intended. "And Mr. Ellis has been nothing but a gentleman and an honest partner." "I'm sure he has." The banker's wife set down the gloves. "I just thought you should know what people are saying. Some are even wondering if your husband left because of Mr. Ellis." The accusation was so absurd that Zara nearly laughed. Harold left because of his gambling debts, as everyone in town well knows. Mr. Ellis didn't arrive until after he was gone. "Well, I'm only telling you this for your own good." Mrs. Hollister sniffed. "A woman in your position can't be too careful about her reputation." After the woman left without buying anything, Zara closed the store briefly and escaped to her apartment, hands shaking with anger. She had been so focused on saving her livelihood that she hadn't considered how her partnership with Yorick might appear to the town's more judgmental residents. When Yorick arrived that afternoon, she was still agitated. He noticed immediately as they reviewed the construction progress. "What's troubling you?" he asked directly. Zara hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Mrs. Hollister paid me a visit. Apparently there's talk about our arrangement." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Ah, small-town gossip." "She implied that our relationship is improper," Zara continued, cheeks flushing. "That people think we were involved before Harold left." Yorick's expression hardened slightly. "That's ridiculous." "Of course it is, but perception matters in a place like Stillwater." "My reputation, your reputation should be based on your character and actions, not malicious gossip," he interrupted, his voice gentle despite the firmness of his words. "You've worked honorably to pay debts you didn't create. You've built this business through honest effort." "Nevertheless," Zara persisted, "perhaps we should be more circumspect, fewer shared meals, more formal in our dealings." Yorick was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "Is that what you want?" The question caught her off guard. Was it what she wanted? Over the past months, Yorick's company had become something she looked forward to, a bright spot amid the hard work and lingering sadness. The thought of returning to a more distant relationship left her feeling hollow. "No," she admitted finally. "But I don't want to damage the business we've built, or your reputation along with mine." A slow smile spread across his face. "Then let's not worry about Mrs. Hollister or anyone else. We've done nothing wrong, and we won't let gossip dictate our actions." His confidence was reassuring, but Zara couldn't dismiss her concerns entirely. What if Harold returned someday? Or what if the gossip becomes so pervasive that customers avoid the store? If Harold returns, he'll find a successful business and a wife who survived his betrayal, Yorick said firmly. And as for the gossip, perhaps there's a simple solution. "What's that?" He took a deep breath. "We could court properly." Zara stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "I beg your pardon. I'm suggesting that if people are going to talk regardless, we might as well give them something real to talk about." His expression was earnest, his eyes never leaving hers. "I care for you, Zara. I have for some time. If you feel anything similar, perhaps we could see where it might lead." Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he must hear it. In the months they'd worked together, she'd grown to respect Yorick, to enjoy his company, to depend on his steady presence. But she deliberately avoided examining deeper feelings, still wounded from Harold's betrayal and wary of risking her heart again. "I don't know what to say," she stammered. "You don't need to say anything now," he assured her. "Think about it. Whatever you decide won't affect our partnership." That night, sleep eluded Zara. She paced her small apartment, replaying Yorick's words and examining her own feelings. Harold had been charming but ultimately shallow, his affection as false as his promises. Yorick was different, solid, trustworthy kind in ways that had nothing to do with empty flattery. Did she care for him? The answer came more easily than expected. Yes, she did. But was she ready to act on those feelings? That was more complicated. Her marriage still existed legally, even if Harold had abandoned her, and the wounds from his betrayal were still tender. By morning, she had made her decision. She found Yorick at the construction site, discussing roof trusses with the carpenters. When he saw her approaching, he excused himself and met her halfway. "Good morning," he said, studying her face cautiously. "I've been thinking about what you said," Zara began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "About courting." "And I would like that," she said simply. "But there are complications. I'm still legally married even if Harold is gone, and I'm cautious after everything that happened." Yorick nodded, his expression serious. "I understand both concerns. As for the first, we can consult a lawyer about the legalities. In many territories, abandonment is grounds for divorce after a certain period. For the second," his voice softened, "I'm willing to proceed as slowly as you need, Zara. I'm not going anywhere." Relief washed over her. "Then yes, I'd like to court properly." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I'm glad to hear it. Perhaps we could begin with dinner at the hotel tonight, as an official outing rather than a business meeting." Zara returned his smile. "I'd like that very much." Word of their courtship spread quickly through Stillwater, as news always did. Some, like Mrs. Hollister, pursed their lips disapprovingly at a woman stepping out with a man while still technically married. But many more, especially those who knew firsthand how Harold Nichols had squandered his wife's trust, and livelihood, expressed satisfaction that Zara had found happiness with a man of good character. The store continued to thrive as autumn deepened toward winter. The expansion was completed just before the first heavy snowfall, nearly doubling their floor space. A grand reopening celebration in late November brought most of the town through their doors, and sales exceeded even Yorick's optimistic projections. Their courtship progressed with careful deliberation. Yorick was true to his word about proceeding at Zara's pace, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. They attended church together on Sundays, took rides in his buggy when weather permitted, and shared meals several times each week. Sometimes they simply sat in her apartment in comfortable silence, reading or enjoying each other's company. Christmas approached, bringing with it the coldest weather Zara had experienced since moving to Montana. The streets of Stillwater were often deserted as people hurried from building to building, eager to escape the biting wind. Inside the store, however, a cheerful fire burned continuously, making it a welcoming haven for customers. On Christmas Eve, Yorick arrived with a small pine tree strapped to his saddle. "I thought you might like some holiday cheer," he explained as he carried it up to her apartment. Together, they decorated it with paper chains, dried berries, and a few glass ornaments that Zara had carefully preserved from her childhood. When they finished, Yorick produced a small package from his coat pocket. "Merry Christmas, Zara." Inside was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. When opened, it revealed a tiny compartment, empty but waiting for memories to be preserved. "It's beautiful," she whispered, deeply touched. "I thought you might want to carry something precious with you," he said. "A memento of someone or something important." She fastened it around her neck, the silver cool against her skin. "I have something for you as well." She retrieved a package from her bedroom, a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool that matched his eyes. "I know it's not much." "It's perfect," he interrupted, immediately wrapping it around his neck despite the warmth of the room. "Did you make this yourself?" Zara nodded, pleased by his evident delight in the simple gift. "During the evenings, it helped pass the time when you were at the ranch." They sat together beside the tree, sharing spiced cider and watching the flames dance in her small stove. Outside, snow began to fall, large flakes drifting past the window in the gathering darkness. "I should go before the roads become impassable," Yorick said reluctantly as the clock struck 8. "You could stay," Zara suggested impulsively. "In town, I mean. The hotel will likely be full with travelers stranded by the weather," he finished for her. "Don't worry. My horse knows the way home, even in snow." She walked him downstairs to the store's entrance. At the door, he turned and took her hands in his. "Thank you for a wonderful evening, Zara. Thank you for the tree and the locket, and—" She hesitated, then continued softly, "for everything you've given me these past months. Not just financially, but hope. A future." His expression was tender as he bent to kiss her cheek. "You've given me just as much." After he left, Zara watched through the window as his figure disappeared into the swirling snow. Something warm and unfamiliar bloomed in her chest, not just affection or gratitude, but a deeper emotion she was finally ready to acknowledge. Love, tentative but undeniable. The new year brought change to Stillwater. The railroad completed a spur line directly to town, making travel and shipping easier. New businesses opened, including a competitor to Ellis and Nichols, a fancy emporium that carried imported goods at prices that made Zara's eyes widen in disbelief. "They won't last 6 months," Yorick predicted after visiting the new store. "No one in Stillwater will pay $5 for a jar of French mustard when they can get perfectly good American mustard from us for 50 cents. He was right. By spring, the emporium had closed its doors, and Ellis and Nichols had absorbed its remaining inventory at auction prices, adding a small luxury goods section that proved popular for special occasions and gifts. In April, nearly a year after Harold's disappearance, Zara received a letter from a lawyer in San Francisco. Harold had been found dead after a barroom brawl over gambling debts. The lawyer expressed perfunctory condolences, and requested instructions regarding the disposition of personal effects: a pocket watch, a wedding ring, and 37 cents. Zara read the letter 3 times before its implications fully registered. She was a widow now, legally free. The news brought no grief, only a strange sense of closure. She closed the store early and walked to Yorick's ranch for the first time. It was a pleasant 3-mile journey along a well-maintained road, the spring landscape vibrant with new growth. As she crested the final hill, the ranch spread out before her: a substantial log house with a wide porch, several outbuildings, fenced pastures with cattle grazing peacefully, and fields freshly plowed for planting. Yorick was working in a corral with a young horse when she approached. He looked up, surprise quickly giving way to pleasure at the sight of her. "Zara, this is unexpected." He secured the horse and came to meet her, concern crossing his features as he noted her solemn expression. "Is everything all right?" Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. He read it quickly, then looked up at her, his eyes questioning. "How do you feel about this?" "Relieved," she admitted. "And sad, not for Harold specifically, but for what might have been if he'd been a different man. Mostly, though, I feel free." Yorick nodded, understanding what she couldn't quite articulate. "Would you like to come inside? I can offer tea or perhaps something stronger." The ranch house was exactly as she'd imagined from his descriptions: spacious but comfortable, with simple furnishings and large windows that filled the rooms with light. A stone fireplace dominated the main living area, and bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes on everything from cattle breeding to Shakespeare. They sat at his kitchen table with cups of strong coffee. Yorick waited patiently, seemingly content to let her speak when ready. "I came here today," Zara finally began, "because I wanted to tell you about Harold in person, and because—" She took a deep breath. "Because I love you, Yorick. I think I have for some time, but I couldn't fully acknowledge it while I was still tied to Harold." Joy transformed his face. "I love you too, Zara. Since that day in the bank when you refused to accept charity and demanded a proper partnership instead." That long," he confirmed with a smile. "Though I tried to be patient and not rush you. You were the perfect gentleman," she assured him. "You still are." "Not entirely," he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Because right now I very much want to kiss you." "I wouldn't object," Zara whispered. He stood and came around the table, drawing her to her feet. His hands were gentle as they framed her face, his eyes asking a final question that she answered by leaning toward him. Their lips met softly at first, then with growing confidence as Zara wound her arms around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Yorick rested his forehead against hers. "I've waited a long time to do that." "It was worth the wait," she murmured, feeling dizzy with happiness. They spent the afternoon touring his ranch. Yorick showed her the fields where he grew wheat and vegetables, the stream that provided water year-round, and the apple orchard he'd planted 3 years earlier, which was just beginning to produce fruit. Everywhere she looked, Zara saw evidence of his careful stewardship and long-term planning. "You've built something beautiful here," she told him as they walked hand in hand back toward the house. "It's still a work in progress," he replied. "Like all worthwhile things." Before she left to return to town, Yorick took both her hands in his. "Zara, I don't want to rush you, especially with the news you received today. But I want you to know that whenever you're ready, I would be honored to make a life with you, whether that's next month or next year." "Are you proposing?" she asked, heart quickening. "Not formally." "Not yet." His smile was tender. "When I do, you'll know it. I just wanted you to know my intentions are serious." "As are mine," she assured him. "But you're right, I need some time. Not to decide about us, but to properly close one chapter before beginning another." He kissed her once more before she departed, a promise in the gentle pressure of his lips against hers. Spring passed in a blur of activity. The store required constant attention as Stillwater's population swelled with new arrivals. Zara hired 2 assistants, a young widow named Mrs. Chen and her teenage son, to help manage the increased business. Meanwhile, she quietly made arrangements for Harold's personal effects to be sent from San Francisco and consulted with the lawyer about the legal formalities of widowhood. Yorick divided his time between the ranch and town, overseeing the planting season while still maintaining his role in their business partnership. He and Zara continued their courtship with a new openness, no longer concerned about town gossip now that her marital status was clear. On a perfect June evening, exactly 14 months after their first meeting, Yorick invited Zara to a picnic by the river that ran through his property. He collected her from the store in his best buggy, which had been polished until it gleamed in the late afternoon sunlight. "You look beautiful," he said as he helped her into the seat. Zara had worn her finest dress, blue cotton with delicate white embroidery at the collar and cuffs. The silver locket he'd given her at Christmas hung at her throat. The picnic spot was idyllic, a grassy bank beneath a spreading cottonwood tree, with the river gurgling peacefully nearby. Yorick had prepared everything meticulously, from the checkered blanket to the wicker basket filled with cold chicken, fresh bread, strawberries, and a bottle of good wine. As they ate, they talked about the store, the ranch, the changing face of Stillwater. Zara described her plans to add a millinery section, while Yorick spoke of expanding his cattle herd. Their futures were increasingly intertwined in these conversations, I gradually giving way to we, without either of them remarking on the shift. After they had finished the meal, and Yorick had poured them each a second glass of wine, he grew uncharacteristically quiet. Zara waited, sensing he had something important to say. Finally, he set down his glass and turned to face her fully. "Zara, when we met last year, you were in a desperate situation and I offered you a business partnership. It was the right thing then, and it's been successful beyond what either of us imagined." "It has," she agreed, wondering where he was leading. "But I find that a business partnership isn't enough anymore." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I want a true partnership in all things. In business, yes, but also in life, in love, in building a future together." He opened the box to reveal a ring, a perfect diamond set in gold, simple yet elegant. "Zara Nichols, I love you more than I ever thought possible. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Though she had anticipated this moment for weeks, the reality of it, the earnest love in his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands as he held out the ring, overwhelmed her. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly. "Yes, Yorick, I would be proud to be your wife." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her alone. Perhaps it had been. "I promise to cherish you always," he said softly. "To be your partner in all things, to support your dreams as you've supported mine." "And I promise the same," Zara replied, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling in her chest. "To build our future together, to face whatever comes side by side." Their kiss sealed these promises, tender at first, then deepening with the certainty of their commitment to each other. When they finally broke apart, Yorick kept her close, his arms a haven she never wanted to leave. "When do you want to be married?" he asked, stroking her hair. "Soon," Zara replied without hesitation. "I don't want a long engagement, perhaps in August after harvest begins." "August is perfect," he agreed. "Here on the ranch or in town?" "The church in town," she decided. "And then perhaps a celebration here afterward. It's so beautiful." They remained by the river until twilight, planning their wedding and their life together. Yorick described his vision for expanding the ranch house, adding rooms for children they both hoped would come, enlarging the kitchen that would become Zara's domain as much as his. "You'll still want to work at the store sometimes?" he asked. "Yes," she confirmed. "Perhaps not every day once we have a family, but it's become important to me. I've found I have a talent for business." "You certainly do," he agreed. "The store has thrived under your management. I wouldn't want you to give that up." His understanding warmed her heart. Harold had always expected her to conform to his wishes, never considering that she might have ambitions of her own. Yorick saw her as she was capable, independent, strong, and loved her for those qualities rather than despite them. News of their engagement spread quickly through Stillwater. Congratulations poured in from customers and neighbors alike. Even Mrs. Hollister stopped by the store to express good wishes, though she couldn't resist adding, "It's fortunate your period of mourning was so brief." With a meaningful glance at the calendar, Zara merely smiled. "Yes, Mrs. Hollister, I am indeed fortunate. In many ways." Wedding preparations consumed much of Zara's free time. She ordered fabric from St. Louis for a proper wedding gown, enlisted Mrs. Chen's help with the sewing, and planned a reception that would accommodate the many townsfolk who considered themselves friends of the bride and groom. Yorick, meanwhile, devoted himself to preparing their future home. He hired carpenters to add 2 bedrooms and expand the kitchen, enlisted a painter to refresh the interior, and ordered new furniture from as far away as Chicago. Every detail was attended to with the same careful consideration he gave to all his endeavors. August 12, 1883, dawned clear and warm, perfect weather for a wedding. Zara dressed in her new gown of ivory silk, simple but elegant, with Mrs. Chen's skilled hands arranging her hair and pinning fresh flowers among the auburn curls. "You look like an angel," the older woman said, stepping back to survey her work. "Mr. Ellis is a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Zara replied, touching the locket that would be her, something old for the ceremony. Inside, she had placed a tiny photograph of Yorick, taken by a traveling photographer who had visited Stillwater in July. The church was filled to capacity when she arrived. As the organ began to play and she walked down the aisle on the arm of Mr. Peterson, who had graciously agreed to give her away in the absence of family, Zara saw only Yorick, standing tall and handsome at the altar, his eyes never leaving hers. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged traditional vows, though each added personal promises that brought tears to the eyes of many guests. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Yorick's kiss was both gentle and possessive, a public declaration of his love and commitment. The celebration afterward at the ranch lasted well into the evening. Lanterns were strung from trees, tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by half the town, and a small band played music for dancing on a wooden platform constructed especially for the occasion. As darkness fell and stars appeared overhead, Yorick led Zara away from the festivities to a quiet spot behind the house. "Happy, Mrs. Ellis?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "I never imagined I could be this happy." "When you walked into the bank that day," he said softly, "I saw a woman facing impossible odds with courage and dignity. I knew then that you were someone special." "And I thought you were just a kind stranger," Zara admitted. "I had no idea you would become my whole world." His kiss was tender, a promise of the night to come and all the days that would follow. "Let me give you everything," he whispered against her lips. "My heart, my life, my love, everything I have and am." "I already have everything I need," she replied, "because I have you." The years that followed brought changes to Stillwater and to the Ellis family. The town continued to grow, becoming an important regional center with a proper hotel, a school, and eventually a small hospital. Ellis and Nichols General Mercantile expanded again, adding a second story that housed a furniture showroom and sewing supplies department. Yorick's ranch prospered as well. He gradually increased his holdings until the Ellis Ranch became one of the largest and most successful operations in the county, known for quality beef and innovative farming practices. But the greatest joy for Yorick and Zara came in the form of their growing family. Their first child, a son they named Thomas, arrived exactly 9 months after their wedding, a fact that caused Zara to blush whenever it was mentioned. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 2 years later, and another son, James, 2 years after that. Zara managed to balance motherhood with her continued involvement in the store, often bringing the children with her when they were small. As they grew older, they became helpers, Thomas showing a particular aptitude for business, while Elizabeth preferred working with the ranch animals, and James demonstrated early artistic talents. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1893, Yorick surprised Zara with a trip to San Francisco, a city she had often expressed curiosity about, but had never visited. They left the children with trusted ranch hands and Mrs. Chen, who had become like family over the years, and embarked on the newly completed railway line that made the journey considerably more comfortable than it would have been a decade earlier. San Francisco dazzled Zara with its hills, its cosmopolitan atmosphere, and its glimpses of the vast Pacific Ocean. They stayed in a grand hotel, attended the theater, and shopped in stores that made their own mercantile seem provincial by comparison. On their final evening in the city, they dined in the hotel's elegant restaurant, surrounded by crystal and silver that gleamed in the soft lamplight. "Thank you for this wonderful adventure," Zara said, raising her champagne glass to Yorick. "It's been magical." "You deserve every happiness," he replied, his eyes as warm and loving as they had been on their wedding day. "These past 10 years have been the best of my life." "Mine too." Zara reached across the table to take his hand. "When Harold left me with nothing but debts, I thought my life was over. I never imagined it was just beginning." "I knew from the moment I saw you that you were extraordinary," Yorick said, "strong enough to survive anything, yet still capable of such tenderness." Zara smiled, thinking of how far they had come together. "Do you remember what you said to me that day in the bank? Let me give you everything." "I remember." He squeezed her hand gently. "I hope I've kept that promise." "You have," she assured him. "But what you didn't know then, what I didn't know either, was how much I would give you in return." "Everything," Yorick said simply. "You've given me everything." In the warm San Francisco night, surrounded by the trappings of wealth and success, they recognized the true nature of their prosperity. Not in the thriving business they had built together, nor in the ranch that had grown beyond their early dreams, but in the love that had turned a desperate partnership into a life of shared joy. They returned to Stillwater and to the family and community that awaited them there, carrying with them memories of their grand adventure, but eager to resume the quiet, meaningful life they had created together. Their story, which had begun with loss and uncertainty, had become one of resilience, partnership, and enduring love. As they stepped off the train in Stillwater, their 3 children rushed forward to greet them, followed more sedately by Mrs. Chen. Yorick gathered them all into his arms while Zara looked on, her heart full to overflowing. This, she thought, was everything the love of a good man, the joy of their children, the satisfaction of work well done, the security of knowing that whatever challenges might come, they would face them together. When Harold had abandoned her with nothing but debts, she could never have imagined that his betrayal would lead to such complete happiness. But standing there on the platform, surrounded by her family with the town she loved spread out before her, Zara Ellis knew she had found far more than she had lost, a life richer and more fulfilling than any she could have dreamed of when that fateful letter had arrived 11 years before. "Welcome home," Yorick said, extending his hand to her with the same warm smile that had first won her trust. And taking his hand, Zara stepped forward into the future they would continue to build together, day by day, year by year, with love as their foundation and strength as their legacy.